Nowadays, in sales and in sales training and general sort of society, we taught not to be too pushy, aren't we? You know, let people think about it, give them the information, and let's do things at the prospect or the customer's pace. And that's all well and good, and I probably agree with that to a large extent. Nobody likes to be press ganged or bullied or forced into a situation. When I started selling life assurance, though, the general modus operandi, it's about the extent of my Latin skills, but the general MO was that, well, I'll give you an example. When I worked for one very large life assurance company, whom I won't name here, my boss would say to me, he was also called Steve and we were very good friends, but then he'd say to me, Steve, how many appointments have you got this evening? And I'd say, oh, I've just got the one, Steve. Which I'd probably spent all day cold calling on the phone to get. And he'd say, don't come back in here tomorrow without a cheque and a signed proposal. Whatever you do, just don't bother coming in to use the office. Work from home unless you bringing new business in. And that was the rule. You didn't get to use the desk, the office, the coffee machine, secretarial service unless you brought new business in that day. That was kind of an incentive, if you like, so you could use the nice offices. And so I went out on this call to a lovely couple and they were selling their house, and I was there to sell them an endowment policy or life assurance plan ahead of when they sold the house. Truth is, they didn't really need it until they'd sold the house, or so I thought. They were going to probably sell their house in 6 to 12 months' time because the market was fairly slow. And so our pitch was, well, if you take out the endowment policy right now, you'll pay 6 months off your mortgage in advance without actually paying the mortgage as well, and so on and so forth. But they either didn't get this or they weren't too keen on this idea, but nor was I very keen on the idea of A, not earning any money that night, and B, not being able to go into the office the next day at all, not just with my head held high and a new piece of new business in my hand. So I stayed and I went over it again and I went over it again. And I drummed it into them with a hammer and chisel. And it was like a process of attrition. I kind of wore them down. And I think I probably turned up at about 7 o'clock or 7:30 that evening. And it's probably about midnight or something like that when I left. I'd eaten them out of chocolate biscuits. I'd drunk all their tea and orange juice. But I did leave with a completed application form and a cheque for the first month's premium and a completed direct debit form. So I went into the office the very next day as a complete and utter hero, and very, very proudly stuck my name up on the board, stuck the points it got me and the commission it made me, which was about 500 quid or something like that. Not bad for an evening's work in the 1980s, not bad nowadays really. And yeah, great. Went out for beers with the boss that night and he told me how great I was, and I felt really great and really real about myself. Watch the next video to find out what happened next. It might surprise you. It definitely surprised me.